So last week, Krystal Ball got to sit down during Breaking Points with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and press him on his stance with Israel. Now, this interview, we're going to play a clip from the interview. It's about 20 minutes long. We're going to play about 6 minutes of it. It's really unfortunate that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would not sit down with somebody like Max Blumenthal. I would love to talk to him about this issue, but it is good that he was willing to go and talk to somebody about this. And Krystal has been very much vocal about this issue, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was willing to sit down and have this interview or this discussion or this sort of debate, I suppose, with her. So we're going to play. We're going to play 6 minutes of this clip, and I'm going to kind of stop in points of this and break down some of the things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said during this interview. So let's get started. Let's watch.
At what point do you say, okay, it's enough? Because the other piece of this, even if you say, and I know you're not saying this, I'm not putting, but even if you say, I don't care about the Palestinian lives, they got to do what they got to do. It's the cost of war. What are you going to do? There's also a lot of evidence that what they're actually doing is fomenting increasing support for Hamas. Because if you think about it, if you're a kid and your parents get blown up, what kind of politics do you think you're going to have when you grow up? Isn't that going to be tremendously radicalizing and incredibly compromising to the security of Israelis alike?
So how would you get rid of Hamas?
Well,
if you're Israel.
Well, I'm not running for president of the United States, number one. But number two, I think we have a model for this in a.
So before I have her go on and talk about how she would get rid of Hamas, I just want to bring up that when somebody asks this question, so when he says, how would you get rid of Hamas? She is right. She's not the one running for president, so she's not the one who would have to come up with a solution to this. But of course, we all have opinions, and she's about to give her opinion. But when somebody asks that question, he's basically asserting that he's in agreement with Israel's policy. When he says, well, how would you do it? That's like, this is the way we're doing it. So how would you do it? How would you do it differently if you're going to criticize this particular method? So what he's basically saying by asking that question is turning it on to Krystal and instead saying to her, what he's really saying to all of us is that he agrees with the current policy that Israel is implementing, which is indiscriminate bombing and mass slaughter of people in an attempt to try to get to Hamas, and then it's debatable whether or not that's really what they're doing, and we're going to get into that a bit later. But that's really what he's asserting right there, is that he agrees with Israel's current policy because he's not offering a different alternative. He's instead going to debate Krystal on everything except coming up with a different solution for how they're doing it. Let's keep watching.
From the way we went in and approached bin Laden. So it was a targeted raid. If you're actually going to do this, you do a counter-terror operation where you go in a targeted way. You create a wedge between Hamas and the civilian population. And we see how this works in the past because previously in Israeli society, when there were pathways to peace that were on the table, where the Palestinian civilian population felt that they had a chance at negotiating some sort of a peaceful outcome, guess what? Support for Hamas falls off a cliff. It's almost a one-to-one relationship with the more brutal the response from the Israelis, the more support for radicalism that there is.
You can filibuster.
I'm not filibustering. You asked me a question. I'm trying to answer it.
I think you're filibustering. You're not answering the question. You're saying drive a wedge. Well, of course Israel's trying to drive a wedge.
By offering some other path that's not terrorism and not violence.
What is that path?
It's a path to a two-state solution or some sort of a just and lasting peace.
So I don't think she was I think she was actually answering the question. He just didn't like the answer. She was giving a different response, whether you agree with it or not. I don't know if I necessarily agree with her particular vision on how she would go about combating this, but she did give an actual response pointing to previous American policy on how, again, not that the U.S. was also so successful with it, so I'm not sure if I would use U.S. policy, past policy decisions, but she did give an answer to this, and that is she pointed to past U.S. policy and said, why can't we go about it this particular way? And he's saying, no, you're filibustering. You're not answering the question. She actually is. It's just not the response he was wanting to hear, which is, I guess, indiscriminately bomb, go in there. Sorry, civilians are going to die. They're being used as human shields. I mean, instead of spewing all of the Israel talking points, she's not doing that, and he seems to be pushing back on that. But I do think she answered the question, so let's keep watching.
And the Palestinians not only have rejected that, but Hamas, its whole purpose was the reason that Hamas was able to get all this popular support and take over was because of its opposition to any negotiation.
Hamas just came out and said that they support Israel's PLO and recognize Israel's right to exist. On the other hand, you have the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the UK saying we will absolutely no to a two-state solution.
I just cannot let you tell that's just not true.
It's just happened.
Oh gosh, I have to stop this just right there when he says, I can't, Krystal, I cannot let you. I mean, what in the hell? Honestly, this is like the people who interviewed RFK Jr. about COVID. And during those interviews, he would say something about the vaccines or about the pandemic, and they would say, oh, whoa, I can't. Well, she did that to him, actually. Actually, she did that to him in a previous interview about COVID. She actually did do this, whoa. I cannot let you continue to tell this lie. And we got on her case about that. That was not the right way. Have a discussion, listen to somebody, hear them out, and then counter their points. Don't say, whoa, I cannot let you continue telling this lie. This is the stuff we hear on CNN. On CNN, or we can't, or MSNBC. We do not want to continue allowing misinformation to be spread on our network, so we're going to shut you down right here and there. That's the stuff that they pulled on him during the entire pandemic. And now he's doing the same thing in reverse, but saying, I cannot let you continue on telling this lie. Oh, okay. Let's keep watching.
Ismail Haniyeh was on TV on Al Jazeera yesterday saying we're going to do this again and again and again. We will never negotiate.
Which we covered and which is disgusting. But there's what about the fact? But hold on. What about the fact that Netanyahu and his government have said absolutely no. They built up Hamas to try to thwart any sort of Palestinian statehood. Where's the focus on that?
I'm not defending Netanyahu, and I don't co-sign what Netanyahu and Likud do. Israel is a divided country. 80 or 20% of the population were on the street demonstrating against Netanyahu. What I'm saying is Hamas is a criminal enterprise.
Sure.
Yes. The Palestinian, and you talk about solutions for the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are arguably the most pampered people by international aid organizations in the history of the world.
Are you kidding me? No, even before this war, 78% of people in Gaza said they had, not enough food to eat.
Right. And why is that? Why are you blaming Israel?
In part, it's Hamas, and in part, it's the fact that Israel imposed a blockade and talked about putting them on a diet.
If your neighbor. First of all, Israel has no obligation. Israel built 3,000 hothouses and gave them for greenhouses. That would have made Gaza completely food self-sufficient, gave it to them as a gift, offered to rebuild the port of Gaza to make it the Singapore of the West. Hamas said, no, we don't want Jew money, we don't want Jew ideas. And what do? The international aid agencies have given Gaza more than 10 times per capita what we gave to rebuild all of Europe after the Marshall Plan. They've gotten $8,300 per capita, every person in Gaza. We rebuilt Europe with $621 per capita in Europe, and we rebuilt it. What did they do with that money? Instead of using it to make this, Gaza is this beautiful country, white sand beaches, it should be a paradise. Hamas said, we don't want that. They take virtually all of that money and they steal it. So the top 5 leaders of Hamas are billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh has $5 billion, according to Forbes.
But Bobby, again,
wait, let me just finish. No, because you you are making a statement that is just wrong. It's not Israel's fault that Gaza is poverty-stricken. Gaza should be one of the wealthiest states on the Mediterranean.
They have no control over their own territory.
Of course,
Israel
if you go to war,
everything that comes in and goes out.
If you go to war, no, Krystal, why are you blaming? Why do you insist on blaming Israel rather than blaming Hamas?
I do blame Hamas, but you know what else, Bobby? Our tax dollars do not go to Hamas. They go to the Netanyahu government.
And you know what?
Our bombs, 22,000 of which are being bombed, dropped on the civilian population right now.
You know what most of our tax dollars have gone for? For the Iron Dome, which is a way of not invading Gaza. Our country and Israel for 16 years have expended this huge amount of money to try not to go into Gaza, while Gaza sent 2,000 rockets a year, suicide bombers, and of course Israel's
And how many times has Israel come in and quote unquote mowed the lawn?
They've gone in 5 times, and every time they've signed a peace agreement with Hamas, and every time they violated that peace agreement. Let me
well,
just.
Israel also has been killing Palestinians in the West Bank. But hold on.
Listen,
I want to move
if
forward.
Mexico attacked us and we built a fence, would you blame us for caging in Mexico? Well, I don't know what it is, but everything in your mind is telling you to blame Israel instead of blaming Hamas.
And everything in his mind is telling him to exonerate Israel for absolutely everything. First of all, let's just kind of go bit by bit on this one. Mexico, for example, when he says, if we went to war with Mexico, wouldn't we build, if we build a wall, would you say that we're caging them in? Well, obviously not. I mean, if we were to build a wall on our southern border with Mexico, Mexico is still a sovereign nation with oceans on both sides of it and its own southern border, and it would be in control of all that. Now, if we were to blockade Mexico, if we were to put not only a wall on our southern border, but then we also controlled all of their ports and not allowed a single ship to get into the Mexican ports, and we controlled their southern border, and gave a lot of money to their southern border in order to bribe them into doing what we want. By the way, Egypt is our number 2 donor, recipient, I should say. Israel's been the number 1 recipient of U.S. aid. Number 2 has been Egypt, largely so that we could help control Egypt and Egypt's policy towards the Palestinians. It's a strategic move in doing that. So you've got, that would be a blockade. If we were to surround Mexico, that would be equivalent to that. That would be then boxing them in, not just building a simple wall between us and them, but then they still have complete control over their air, their water, their ports, their cellular. They can get things into their country, and as far as goods and whatnot, it would be very different another way. He goes back, so he also talks about the 3,000 greenhouses that Israel gave to Gaza that should have made Gaza food self-sufficient. He also said that aid agencies have given per capita $8,300 to Gazans, which is 10 times what was given in the Marshall Plan, and that Israel offered to rebuild the port of Gaza, but that was rejected. So let's break those claims down briefly. First of all, let's go to the Israelis offered to rebuild the port of Gaza, but that was rejected. That's not true. The Gaza ports have actually been in negotiation to be rebuilt. There's been several proposals to those, but it's actually been the Israelis who've been very difficult to work with. For example, in 1994, the Dutch government committed some 23 million euros to the Gaza Seaport project. France committed an additional $20 million to that project. The same year, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and the Dutch, French, European Gaza Development Group signed a contract for the project. So they were in the works of doing this. This was after the Oslo Accords, and they were going to be able to build their port. However, the reports came back that it was difficult to reach consensus with Israel on issues regarding engineering, operations, and security. Israel will often come to an agreement with the Palestinians, and then they'll renege on those agreements by saying matters of security. Oh, for security reasons, we can't. Oh, for security reasons, it's not exactly the way, yeah, we said that, but we meant only if we could guarantee our security, and we can't guarantee our security. So things break down. I have friends who went over to Palestine to help rebuild water infrastructure. They were Zionists. They believed that for religious reasons, that the Jews need to gather back in Jerusalem in order for Christ to come back. And so they had these viewpoints, and they believed that the Palestinians brought much of this onto themselves. They had those beliefs when they got there. However, when they got there to try to rebuild the water infrastructure for the Palestinian people in the West Bank, they found that their engineers were being shot at, that Israel was making the process extremely slow. It took years and years to get a permit that otherwise should have taken 30 days. So the Israelis slow down the process, and then they cite security reasons for doing so. And that is one of the biggest issues that the Palestinians face, is that they're not really truly in control. They don't have sovereignty over themselves. They have to constantly be asking for permission from Israel. Another time, in April of 2000, the parties signed a new contract. Phase 1 of the project started on 18th of July. The construction was halted as Israel refused to facilitate the supply of needed construction materials. And on the 17th and 18th of September in 2000, Israeli tanks destroyed the project site. In October, Israel bombed the building site in response to an incident in Ramallah. Following this, the donor states ceased funding the project and work on the port stopped. So that's what happened. That's why they don't have a port. The Israelis would not allow it. And you had the French and the Dutch in on this, trying to get this done, and they could not get this done. So that's the Gaza ports when he says, well, they should have had this and they could have become the Singapore of the sea, or, of the Middle East or whatever. If Israel would have allowed it, but Israel just simply doesn't. Regarding the Marshall Plan and the Palestinians being given way more money per capita than the Marshall Plan, I mean, the Marshall Plan was how many years long? 4, 5, 6, 7 years at the most, right? I mean, you're talking 1948 to maybe it concluded in 1952. $13.6 billion were committed to the Marshall Plan. This was in a short period of time to rebuild Europe. You cannot compare that to 75 years of occupation, 75 years of ethnic cleansing, 75 years of being blockaded by Israel. That is a very long time. The people are going to need assistance for a very long time. So when you actually then, he says 10 times, they've been given 10 times the amount of money per person than what was given during the Marshall Plan. Again, you have to account for inflation. The Palestinians from 1994 to 2017, I believe, is around there. Oh, sorry, from 1994 to 2020, the estimated amount of money that had been given to the Palestinians was $40 billion. Okay, so that is a significant larger amount than the $13.6 billion that was given to the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. But again, the rebuild of Europe happened in a very short period of time. And if you actually account for inflation, $13.6 billion is $173 billion today. So that's $173 billion to be given to Europe to rebuild, with nobody standing in the way of Europe being rebuilt. There was a lot of incentive to rebuild Europe. In the meantime, the Israelis have blocked every single attempt the Palestinians have had to get basic infrastructure. And he's saying, well, that 40 billion per capita. But again, Marshall Plan at most was 7 years. We're talking 70 years. So if they were given 10 times the amount of money per person, not when you count, if you count for inflation, that number drastically changes. Once you go from 13.6 billion to 173 billion and then divide that out, that's a much different number, because you'd have to do it that way because we're talking 75 years. So 10 times the length of time, and they haven't even been allowed to rebuild. So that's just the reality of what has gone on there. The Israelis just continue to make promises. This has happened time and time again with the Oslo Accords. And with every single peace agreement they come to. And then it's the Israelis who actually damage the process. They're able to point to, it's very crafty and clever, but they're able to point to the Palestinians and say they are the ones who broke the ceasefire, because they're talking about rockets coming from Gaza. So they're breaking the ceasefire. But from the Palestinian perspective, the ceasefire was broken the minute an IDF soldier harasses and kills a Palestinian kid in the West Bank. And then Israel says, well, that wasn't breaking the ceasefire. It's not like we were bombing you in Gaza. But then the Palestinians say, yeah, but we're supposed to be our own sovereign nation. You're coming in and you're killing our kids. And then you're saying that's not breaking the ceasefire. So from the Palestinian perspective, the ceasefire never stopped. It never even begins, because the minute they supposedly claim a ceasefire, Israel, the IDF, starts going back in and harassing the Palestinians in the West Bank, which we're still seeing right now, and they're not even technically at war in the West Bank right now. So it just is a matter of perspective, and that's kind of the biggest issue with this war. But really, getting this conversation, this is where it always goes, and it's totally pointless. It always goes and kind of devolves into this historical, who did what, who broke what ceasefire, what else would we do? And that is not a constructive conversation in this. This is a 75-year long, if not a little longer than that, when you consider the influx of the Zionists prior to World War II and the things that were going on, and the acts of terrorism between the Israeli Zionists and the British and whatnot in the 1920s and 30s. This has been a very long, like 100 years this has been going on. So you could go back and forth all day long on who did what to who and who was at fault and who did this and who did that. But that's so unproductive. You're never going to win in that. What has to happen is a conversation of, okay, so what do we do now? And that needs to be the conversation. What do we do now? Is it okay when he says, well, they shouldn't, he's going back and forth and she's going back and forth on these details. But what is the solution today? Because right now we're watching what the Israeli solution is, and that is to just indiscriminately bomb and massacre anybody. And we know now for pretty much a fact it's indiscriminate. They're shooting anybody, including their own people. They don't care if they're waving white flags, if they're shirtless, or if they're praying in a Catholic church. They're just shooting them. They're bombing them. They're massacring them. And it's not about Hamas. It's just indiscriminate killing and ethnic cleansing campaign to get these people moved out of the area because Israel, the hardliners in Israel believe that their only way to be secure forever and ever is to just not have Palestinians there on their borders. They don't want them around in that area. They want to take the land and they want to get them out. And they say then that'll be that's their solution. That is how they're going to become secure. So the only question that really matters at this point is, what is the correct solution? Are you saying, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that the correct solution is to expel the Palestinians into Egypt? Is that what you believe is the right solution? Is the right solution to expel them into Lebanon or to expel them into Jordan? Is that the right solution? Is that what you're looking for? Is it going to be a forced expulsion? How do you justify the expulsion of these people who've lived on this land forever? And they're just as ethnic to that region as the Jewish people historically are. So what is the reasoning for expelling them? Do you say it's for reasons of national security? You got to pin people on what do they think the solution should be rather than, yeah, they started it. Oh, yeah, but they started it. Yeah, but they started it. It's just an unproductive conversation. What is your solution, Bobby? What do you think should happen to the Palestinian people? Okay, let's just say you're right, and they are completely to blame for everything that's ever happened to them. Let's say they have rejected every peace agreement. They've squandered all their money. Their leaders are rich because they continue squandering the cash that's been donated to them. Let's say they are the most pampered group of people in regards to how much international money they've received over the years. Let's just say you are right on all of these points. But then what? So does that mean it's okay and it's justifiable to massacre all of these thousands of children? Is that what that means? Does it mean that this is then justifiable to expel them into Egypt or into Jordan or into Lebanon? Is that what you're saying? So even if you're right, so what? What do you do with this group of people? Did they just bring it upon themselves and they all should die and oh well? Because I'm pretty sure that exact rhetoric was used with another group who said, those people will not assimilate. Those people they brought war to us. They forced us to lose World War I. They're conniving. They're stabbing us in the back. They're not assimilating. They're not really one of us, and we need to get rid of them. Because it sounds a lot like that. They brought it upon themselves. And there were a lot of people who believed that. Obviously, at the time. Otherwise, the Nazis would not have had that much support. But they did get all that support because they were using arguments that resonated with people that people felt like, yeah, that makes sense to me. These people were not evil people. They were people who were worried about their country. They were worried about their safety, just like the Israelis are. And they used arguments and they soaked up those arguments. They believed those arguments because it felt good to them to just say the only thing we can do is just get rid of the threat entirely, get rid of them somehow. And if the other countries won't take them, then I guess you just have to kill them. That is kind of what Israel's saying and doing, right? They're saying, well, if these people won't be taken by Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon, we're just going to be bombing them until these other countries feel so bad they finally take these people. And when it becomes such a humanitarian crisis that it becomes just they must be taken because it's such a horrid situation for them. But who's doing the horrid killing? Who's the one that's actually creating that situation? It's Israel. So really, again, the conversations, we can go around in circles all day long on who did what to who. Even if you were back in the 40s and 30s and you believed all the propaganda against the Jewish people and you just bought it hook, line, and sinker. They were at fault for World War I. They were not able to assimilate. They were backstabbers. They were a security threat. Even if you believed all of that, then what is your solution? What do you think should have been done? Do you then agree with the final solution? Would you say, well, yeah, that was the way to go? No. People today, maybe at that time they would have, it's hard to imagine, but today, of course, we would say, no, absolutely not. That was not the right solution. And yet, that argument is being used today. It's, of course, sugar-coated differently. It's painted with a different brush. And so people don't realize that it's very similar. But it is ultimately when you say, well, you know, we offered them all these things and they just wouldn't take it. So what else can we do? Well, I would like to know, what is it you think you should do? And get them to say it out loud, because that's the thing. They're not willing to say it out loud. They're willing to hem and haw and insinuate it by asking you instead, well, what would you do? Oh, so we can say, you know, we believe you're committing ethnic cleansing. We believe that this is a catastrophe, even a genocide. We believe that's what you're doing. And if your response to me from that accusation isn't, no, I'm not, because here's why, and this is what we're really doing, and this is what's going to happen when it's all over. If your response is instead, well, what would you do? Maybe take a hard look at everything. I think that would be a hard look at the response, a hard look at the answers. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. needs to, you know, maybe he agreed to do this with Krystal because the last time they did a debate together, Krystal did not turn out looking very good in that COVID debate. Robert F. Kennedy came out the clear. He looked great on that. It boosted him quite a bit. Maybe he thought this would do the same. I did see a lot of comments people were very in support of him and his position in Israel, and they definitely trashed her in this debate, saying that, well, she wouldn't let him talk. She was interrupting him all the time. All I heard was both of them doing it. I heard both of them talking over each other. I heard both of them interrupting one another. I heard both of them yelling at each other. Both of them, you know, to me, it wasn't like, oh, Krystal was just like last time behaving in a certain way. It was both of them in this. They're both very emotional, clearly, about this. And I would love to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. debating somebody like Max Blumenthal on this. I would like to, or having a conversation with Max so that Max can bring forward all of because Max would have a counter to all of this, and it would be an actual, genuine, educational debate. And I would like to see that.